Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Conversations with series for the European Economics Association. Today, we're talking to David Stolin, who is an esteemed professor at Toulouse Business School. In 2023, he was the runner-up for the Innovation in Teaching Award for communicating cutting-edge economics research through interviews with comedians. So thank you for joining us today, David. It's great to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what sparked your passion for economics and finance? And then an extra question for fun. If you weren't a professor, what would you be instead? Perhaps I would say a comedian, but on to you.
Yeah, there are professors who would love to be economics professors, would love to be comedians. I know them. They're sort of in the closet. They're gradually coming out. I guess I'd be an entrepreneur. My background is that I grew up in the former Soviet Union and Ukraine and Lithuania, and it was very tempting to go into finance because that was the capitalism that was not allowed. And of course, you're drawn to things that were not allowed. And so I went into studying finance, became a finance professor. I am a finance professor at Toulouse Business School, which few people know. In Toulouse, France, that's the birthplace of the first joint stock company in the world, not Florence or Amsterdam or London. It's Toulouse, 1372. So in a way, the birthplace of capitalism. So I've just, a finance professor in the economics and finance department at our business school. And in 2018, I was in California, and I sort of randomly walked into a stand-up show. And that's not something I do. I was just jet lagged and was trying not to fall asleep. And there I saw a comedian who was very, very funny, but he was doing kind of math and statistics jokes. And it's Bay Area, so people are very tired. People work very hard. They're tired after work. No one was falling asleep. No one was yawning, right? Contrast with some of the things you see sometimes while teaching economics or finance at the university. And so I thought I have to talk to this guy. And I wrote him, we started collaborating, and that kind of snowballed.
It sounds like a very much a lucky but great chance encounter you had with the comedian. I think Sami Ubaid, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. And in your previous talks about how you incorporate humor, you've made an important distinction between explaining with humor versus explaining through humor. Could you elaborate on this difference and why you believe explanatory humor is so effective for teaching these economic concepts?
Yes, if you explain with humor, then you just remember that your professor, your lecturer was funny, but you might not even remember several years or even months or even days or even hours later what they were funny about or what the topic was that they were teaching. If you're explaining through humor, then it's inevitably going to the haha and the aha moments are linked, and in your memory, it's going to be permanently linked, and it's going to help you understand, it's going to help you remember. To give an example, I watched a bit of one of your previous interviews with, and they saw that you were asking a question of a fun fact about yourself, right? And so this is so I was just standing there in the kitchen thinking, okay, what fun fact can I say about myself? And this is often a problem. If you have too many degrees of freedom, it's kind of difficult to say something funny because you can say, or fun, right? It just so many possibilities. And in fact, this is why in communist and authoritarian societies where I grew up, humor was so good because there were so few things that you could say that actually you could be funny. It was paradoxically easier to be funny. Anyway, so I was thinking about this tough question of a fun fact that I can say about myself. And I was eating a cream cheese sandwich, and it fell on my suit right here. It just fell like cream side down, and I had to go change my suit. So, what's the moral of this? So that's a pretty fun fact about myself. But also, there's kind of like there's a moral that don't don't try too hard, right? Don't try too hard with humor. And actually, a lot of effective humor is just related to whatever is happening in the moment, and that's what makes it funny. So, my point about humor is, yeah, don't try too hard, or you'll end up with having to change your suit and send it to the cleaners.
That's interesting. I mean, you've kind of answered one of my questions, which was about, I guess, how do you get humor that everyone will find genuinely funny? But it sounds like you say it's just to take it in the moment or about what's happening and what's going on.
You connect it to what's happening. You make it relatable. You try not to go on forever. And this is a great mnemonic as we are economists. So be economical with words, throw out the necessary words. Don't telegraph the punchline. Don't just kind of save the punchline for the end. And there are other principles. And I have a talk at South by Southwest Education conference where I kind of try to compress everything I know about this kind of educational humor and explaining through humor into this 25-minute talk. And so I would recommend watching that.
And so I guess when you mentioned your story of walking and seeing the comedian, he was explaining maths concepts. I guess all of that is sort of like an observation you've seen, and then you came up with this idea. How did your scientific understanding inform your implementation? Did you take that into consideration or perhaps look at any measurable learning outcomes?
So we started collaborating with Samuel Obeid, and we brought him to Toulouse. We started making videos, and we did want measurable outcomes. It's difficult because, like, what's the counterfactual? So a you make a humorous video explaining market efficiency. How do we know that it's actually working, that it's better with humor than without? So we actually recorded for several of our videos, we actually recorded non-humorous versions with Samuel Obeid, which is actually kind of borderline cruel, because to ask a great comedian not to be funny, it's tough on them. But we did this, and we actually ran tests comparing the humorous and non-humorous versions, and we embedded them in our course on finance. And so we saw that actually there was better test scores, better retention with the humorous version. So we've done those kinds of things.
So you've got kind of two forms of explanatory humor, if I'm right. You've got the short form and then the long form. And then the long form would be your edcoms, your educational comedies, like the videos online. I know you've done some on market efficiency and then CAP-M, and they're only like a couple of minutes long. But then perhaps what does comedy look like in lectures itself, like happening live? Do you think that's important?
In lectures, you don't have to be, and you shouldn't be, a stand-up comedian. But if you have just a couple of things, very unexpected analogy, right? And when so in finance, I'm in the economics and finance department of Toulouse Business School, but I'm on the finance side. So in finance, if you look at something, for example, like Modigliani and Miller theorem, they they would explain it by saying, well, the intuition is that it doesn't matter how you slice a pizza, it's still going to be the same size. So it doesn't matter how you, under certain assumptions, it doesn't matter how you slice a company into debt and equity, it's not going to change the value. So that's inherently humorous. Because it's an unexpected analogy. You don't think, the world of corporations and the world of Italian food They're very far away, so you don't expect this, but it's an unexpected analogy that nonetheless actually makes perfect sense after a moment's reflection. To me, that's the essence of humor. And so if you want to be effective, you just think of some of the harder topics and you think how you can use unexpected analogies or maybe some very kind of exotic, interesting illustrations of the principle that are unexpected and yet they make sense. And you have a few of those. And because the students, the learners don't know when they're going to come, it actually makes it kind of interesting because, hey, like if everyone starts laughing and I don't know what they're laughing about, I'm going to feel left out. So you better pay attention. So actually, the fact that that might happen during a lecture makes learners pay more attention. And of course, how to make it happen. Well, simple. It's people talk about there's a lot of wordplay humor that you find everywhere. To me, it's a little bit shallow. It's good for memorizing things for kind of a mnemonic for a particular concept. But if you really want to go deep into something, analogies and thinking through analogies, really, this is how our brains very largely think. And there is a wonderful book by Douglas Hofstadter and Emmanuel Sander called Analogy as the Fuel and Fire of Thinking, where they make the point, actually, even major scientific discoveries, Einstein and so on, it's actually still analogical thinking. This is how we humans think, maybe differently from LLMs, Gen AI, and so on. And so think of what this reminds you of. Some tough concept to explain. Just think of what it reminds you of. What maybe an unexpected analogy would be. Nowadays, we have generative AI that's a great sparring partner. Literally tell it, okay, so I'm trying to explain the capital asset pricing model. What could be some weird analogies? Don't take the first one they give you, but find something that's exotic enough, that's interesting enough, and there's your joke, and then just save the punchline for the end, and that's going to help students learn and laugh at the same time.
It's quite unexpected to see that it's not just humor, but how you apply it. And it sounds like it comes from unexpected analogies, being able to use humor, but to enforce those connections. That would be the purpose of humor.
Yeah, so I don't want to overplay my hand. I am a finance researcher, not a humor researcher, but this has been a hobby of mine for a while. So I've looked into this, and there is one evolutionary theory of humor that I really like, whether or not it's confirmed, but it seems like it's taken seriously by researchers, which is that essentially humor is what motivates us. So the neurochemicals, these pleasurable neurochemicals that are released when we laugh, dopamine and so on, it's actually what makes us, what rewards us for learning and for discovery. So there is some kind of rustling noise in the bushes. Is it a saber-toothed tiger? Oh no, it's my cousin snoring. Haha! I discovered something. There is the dopamine, and so this is, according to this theory, is what actually fuels discovery. And so, if that theory is true, and I'm not qualified to say whether it is or not, but it's kind of lovely because we are bringing things full circle. We're saying, humor actually is designed there to propel learning, and let's use that.
Just looking back into your evolution, because in 2023 you were interviewing comedians, and I guess now your most recent paper looks at using ChatGPT in creating instructional humor and looking at computational humor. Could you perhaps just share a bit about why you've made that evolution, and perhaps if you see it, if ChatGPT and LLMs create a challenge towards your teaching methodology?
Yes, indeed. I have a little paper I co-authored with colleagues on. It's an early paper on ChatGPT humor. The context there is that the European Finance Association invited me to create a program called Finance plus Humor, where we would bring comedians into this annual event, and we would do things like do a workshop. They would interview researchers, and then there would be a talk show at the end with an audience who are not necessarily academics. And so in conjunction with this, the EFA had actually 3 Nobel laureates coming. And so 3 Nobel laureates in economics who were coming there. And we thought, okay, but let's, in the process of kind of preparing interesting content to engage with these Nobel laureates, can ChatGPT be helpful? And so we essentially ran an experiment where we took their biographies from Nobel.org, and we asked ChatGPT to create humorous versions of them. And then we ran an experiment using, it's a pretty standard methodology. You recruit people on Prolific, a platform where you get experimental subjects, and we asked them to read humorous and non-humorous versions of the biographies. And then later questions were asked about what did they like? Could they answer correctly what the contributions of these Nobel laureates were? And again, there was evidence that even that early ChatGPT humor was helping learners retain things. And then at the so what happened then, though, is that Gen AI, as we know, kept getting better and better, and it's getting better and better at humor as well. And actually, things that capabilities that we only could have imagined even a few years ago, with regard to humor in particular, are now very easy, very fast, and even free. For example, some researchers know this, or some academics know this, but I think it's still a minority. You can go on Notebook LM. So Notebook LM is a Google product based off Google Gemini, where you can literally take your research paper, you go on SSRN, you upload your research paper, or if it's your own, you don't have to go on SSRN, but anyone's, you just upload it, and 3 minutes later, it will produce for you a 15 to 20-minute podcast where 2 people can have this humorous, lighthearted banter about your research paper that provides great insight into it, and is very enjoyable and funny, and it might have some glitches or it might not. But if you listen to it, certainly as someone who wants to present this paper, or it doesn't have to be about a paper, it can be lecture material. If you upload your lecture material and you have this AI-produced podcast about it, it certainly will give you some ideas about how you can more effectively teach this material. So there have been huge strides in terms of computer. It goes beyond computational humor. It's really full-on AI humor now.
One last question to perhaps inspire the academics who are watching. I mean, economics has had a particular reputation for being a disengaging subject, and your talk even referenced the infamous scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. What specific first steps would you give to economics professors, perhaps those who haven't set up that kind of online infrastructure or resources, but they recognize this problem and they're hesitant to incorporate humor?
So what I would suggest is you think what would be your response when you're being asked to talk about whether it's your teaching, whether it's your research, by a comedian. And the thing is, it's a difficult thing to envision, but what we did there at the European Finance Association meeting is, as I mentioned, we did this talk show where we had top researchers coming out and being interviewed by comedians. We just put it out. And I think what's great about this is that, firstly, it's very interesting because people are talking about very interesting research, but they're talking about it, two comedians, in the context of your classic talk shows setup. Think Jimmy Kimmel in the US, or there's UK equivalent, German equivalent, and every country has its equivalents. And if you're watching this, and it's an hour 40 minutes, 100 minutes of content. It's basically filmed live before an audience where the majority are not academics. You watch it and you think, and again, we can include the link under the video. You think, how would I react? We have one of the participants is Bengt Holmström, the Nobel Prize winner, MIT professor, and he's talking about his life's work, and the comedians are asking him about different aspects of it. And at some point, they ask him about his take on market liquidity, and he goes, by the way, I am drinking from the exact same cup that Bengt Holmström sipped from when asked to explain market liquidity. It's a subtle thing. It's a small thing. The audience loves it, right? You're taking a sip while talking about liquidity. You find these kinds of things, and so if you watch this the show, which I think is pretty unique. But at the same time, there are wonderful initiatives elsewhere. There's Kilkenomics as a festival that tries to bring economics and humor together. There are other initiatives. But the simplest thing you can do, and it's a very fun thing to watch, you literally just go on our channel, you watch this talk show, and you ask yourself, what would I do if I were interviewed in this way? And it's actually, what you'll find is it really kind of gets all these creative juices flowing, and you start finding all these interesting analogies and interesting turns of phrase and how to say things more economically, pun intended. And that's what my suggestion would be.
Okay, great. I'm sure they'll take it into consideration. Well, thank you so much, David. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I mean, it's been interesting to hear about your approach to teaching economics, whether it's by comedians or generated by AI systems. Using those humour concepts and analogical systems, I think, should be really useful. For our viewers who want to learn more, Professor Stolin's educational comedy videos and recent research publications are available online and in the caption below. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the European Economics Association's Conversations with series.